final day here of week number 9 at HGC North America, and we've got some exciting games, maybe some revenge factor for one of our teams. It's going to be an exciting day nonetheless. My name is Jay Howe. Joining me is Dreadnought. Dreadnought, we've got teams that are still trying to find their way out of Crucible range. Maybe some of that revenge comes in the way of Endemic versus Simplicity.
Yeah, there's a lot on the line there when looking at Endemic versus Simplicity. For Simplicity, wins are very, very important. The series win, that would be amazing for them, but even the map score wins are very, very important for them going forward. And with the success or the lack thereof as of late, the highs and lows of Endemic being kind of all over the place at this point, I feel like this series is really anyone's game.
After what I saw at the end of EU, I don't know what's possible anymore. We're going to take a look at our standings so we can break this down for you. The 4 teams we'll be looking at between Tempo, Endemic, Simplicity, and No Tomorrow. You can see 3 of those teams are in the bottom 4. No Tomorrow, they are going to have a very tough road ahead of them. There's still a way they can fight their way out, but they have to basically win out from here on. Simplicity, you mentioned it. They moved back to the 6th spot due to LFM dropping yesterday. So LFM, they're hoping for those Simplicity losses, and they're rooting for Endemic today. They'll have a chance maybe next week to control their own fate. So a lot of moving still possible in those last 4 spots. So there's a lot to look forward to as we look towards the playoffs.
Yeah, and what I was talking about a little bit before, though, when looking towards Endemic and knowing that they're going to be up against Simplicity just barely above that threshold here, is that 2 weeks ago, we saw them with the role swap 3-0, Team Freedom. That team sitting at the 3rd place position. Then last week coming in with the 2 subs, a very difficult position for them. And then we get ourselves, you know, a very rough performance in their last series that we got out of them, and it's suddenly like, what does this look like as this roster now that things have come down the line? But as you said, very surprising results here out of the European region.
Yeah, we saw the Monkeys take down Roll20 to start our day, but it was leftovers. The surprise taking that series over Dignitas, going up 2-0 and then thwarting the reverse sweep in that game number 5. Tempo Storm versus No Tomorrow. It's going to be a very difficult for No Tomorrow later in the day, but our attention is focused on the start of today with Endemic versus Simplicity. And you're saying revenge factor? How is that revenge? Well, if we go back to the Western Clash, Endemic sat 1 game away from going to the Western Clash. They could not pick up that extra win versus Tempo Storm. But it was week number 1. Endemic comes out and they lost to Simplicity. And that's like, wait, is this Simplicity team for real? They came out, they had the Sergeant Hammer strategy. And that's a series that after things started to unfold, Endemic's like, boy, we wish we had that back. So Simplicity kept them from the Western Clash. And now, as you were mentioning a minute ago, Simplicity just on that threshold. Crucible, playoffs. There's a big difference between both of those, and Endemic has a chance to maybe say, hey, look, we're going to pick up some wins. We're going to deny you losses and maybe keep them out of playoffs. So there's some slight revenge factor there, some controlling of those games. But as you said, Endemic has looked shaky as of late. Simplicity still has yet to find their footing on a consistent basis. So it's going to be an interesting matchup today.
Yeah, Endemic, the last time that we did end up getting them to perform, it was 3-1 against them, against No Tomorrow, giving No Tomorrow their 2nd win out of the entirety of the back end here of HGC North America. And that is why that is so confusing, is not only the way that No Tomorrow was able to get the win, which No Tomorrow has been slowly climbing, especially with their role swaps. They outperformed themselves, I feel like, on that day. But Endemic definitely made it an easier task, I feel like, than it would have been if we looked at them, you know, weeks before, again, with that kind of example against Team Freedom.
Well, we heard from these teams prior to this matchup, so let's check it out before we get this series underway.
I think Simplicity is kind of like us. Like, we have potential to upset any top teams, but like, we're not as consistent as other top teams. But I believe that like, we can take games off or sets off any top teams on any given day. I think we can easily beat Simplicity if we ban Sergeant Hammer out, because we lost a set last split to Sergeant Hammer, and I think we're just gonna ban it out and cruise 3-0.
It definitely feels like we're an underdog team, and lots of people don't think we're going to do too well. So that's just drive and hunger that makes us play more. So I just can't wait to play.
I think they look like a really weak team. Michael didn't really seem like he wanted to play this season. He seemed like he wanted to take a break. And then they kind of made a mishmatch team of, you know, some players from the other top teams who didn't necessarily have much synergy in the past when they played together. So, you know, judging by the past and then from what I've seen now, it's just not that impressive.
We definitely do want the win, and we think we could dunk on Endemic, so I think it's going to be a 3-0.
It's an interesting take when we hear from these teams, because some of these names have been around for probably the longest. Most of those names on the side of Simplicity we know have been around forever.
Yeah.
And so King Caffeine saying it's kind of a mishmash of, maybe some of the better teams. And then I look, I'm like, is there a mirror here? Because this is a team where it's teams of past success that have come together to try and form their teams. Dansky and Kira more on the newer side compared to the rest of the names that we have throughout both of these teams. So it is interesting, the parallels between this team and both of them maybe struggling to find the consistency. Consistency has been the name of the game since this phase started. Michael Udall touched on it himself at the start of this. But very similar teams in their makeup, Dread.
Yeah, it is cool to kind of see that, because it is very much I feel like depending on what time frame you look at from these rosters, they are very much that mismatch. It's just Simplicity is a little bit more dated than that of Endemic. But when it comes to the in-game results as of late, I don't feel like it is near the same tale. Endemic, though they do have their moments of lows, they also have better highs. They are very much have the opportunity to kind of outperform here. And so it is going to be interesting to see very much if we get that version of Endemic, because I'm not going to lie, like their performance against No Tomorrow was, I've never seen a team take that big of a step back that fast. And yes, they are, again, trying to find their identity, but we're at the time when, is this really the moments that you can be looking for your identity? And as I said before, it feels like this is suddenly a coin toss series.
We saw some unique drafts. We'll get into that in a minute, but every map matters for Simplicity. And let's check out where our battlegrounds will be. Simplicity, as always, banning out Brax's holdout. Tomb of the Spider Queen, banned by Endemic. That is the most picked map for Simplicity. Their second most picked map is Towers of Doom, a map that is also the most picked for Endemic. So they're okay with taking away one of the strengths of Simplicity, but finding ourselves here on Infernal Shrines, Dreadnought. We saw the interesting drafts. This is something that I know you've had a lot of thoughts on. The Arthas against the Maiev, we've seen that come out, but then we saw an Arthas not against the Maiev. Then we saw Endemic try their hand at solo tank Zul, and we're also looking at you, EU, because we saw it some today. But these drafts have looked different than what we would have expected for Endemic, given so many role changes.
Yeah, and I think the biggest one at this point in time was that Arthas priority without seeing the Maiev on the other side. It felt like very much it was just a unique, maybe almost false positive type circumstance within some of the practice here of this roster. So do we still see that same version? Do we see an adjusted version? And again, these are a lot of questions that Endemic is going to be answering here in this series. And Jayhow, I think it even gets more concerning depending on your perspective based on the map bans that we saw come through. The fact that Endemic is the one ridding of Tomb of the Spider Queen, I look at that and I go, that's actually a bigger concern. Though Simplicity is willing to pick it, Simplicity is not a team that thrives over those wave clear oriented battlegrounds. So you taking one of your favorites away shows, to me, giving a lot of respect to Simplicity.
They just want to limit whatever Simplicity thinks that they're good at. They want to take that away. Diablo will be the ban out here by Simplicity. We heard from B-Kid prior to this weekend, because we've seen some drastic meta shifts in the last week plus. Octalis has said, here's a hint. Some things unfold in scrims. People try different things. And now the rest of the teams, between the Arthas, the Zul's coming out, the double support now that Tyranda's in. We've seen a lot of changes. That's not going to change Endemic's mindset, as we will see the hammer ban here. But there is much more to consider. If you end last week and you saw everybody else's meta, you think, I know what to expect here in week number 9. But then Friday started, everybody just like, well, here's my notes. We'll slide them out of the way and we'll start from scratch.
Yeah, it's very much, at this point, every team is really trying to find what is the go-to within this meta. And I do think a lot of that is based on how much Tyrande enables different play styles, different approaches to these battlegrounds. As we get ourselves the Genji ban coming through. But I have so many question marks, more so on the side of Endemic than Simplicity here. And this is one of the few series, Jayhow, that I feel like beforehand you can give me any score result and be like, this happened, and I'd be like, I believe that as a true statement. Like, legitimately any variation. 3-0s in both directions, game 5s in either directions. But we get ourselves the Medivh.
The Maiev. I was going to say, we've talked about the Maiev lately. For Simplicity, Dreadnought, K1 Pro, since he started adapting more to this Maiev, that's when Simplicity has started to pick up more of the skirmishes, more of the initiation, and better team fights than we have seen them be able to pick up in the past. But in Endemic, they're going to pick up Johanna. That will give them the wave clear, the ability to walk away from the tether. And if there's a Tyrande on the other side, the blinds to try and circumvent some of those auto attacks that can reset the healing on her Q ability.
And some of the other common synergies that we have gotten with the Maiev is, King Caffeine's moved over to things like the Tyrael for that Sanctification all-in approach here. That Death Ball strategy, it has made Simplicity look a little bit better, but it does come at some trade-offs in the macro game and things, and teams have really been able to exploit that weakness within the compositions for Simplicity here. But we do get ourselves the Deckard and Raynor, not as much all-in, I feel like, when looking at the Deckard and Raynor there, so a bit more balance in the approach from Simplicity.
We saw a similar draft previously. Raynor does okay dealing with the objective on this map versus something like a Tomb of the Spider Queen, where is wave clear, am I deficient in the wave clear against an objective? For the objective, it's good. Against the objective, it's much more well-rounded here. You are more reliant. You have to be more passive in your defense, but they have a lot of control around the objective. So Simplicity could play towards winning. That's right now. We haven't seen an Alex Straza picked up yet. See if Endemic goes that route.
With the white main ban, really removes that double support Tyrande white main pickup that we have seen some teams in North America kind of catering to. Tyrande still would not be too shabby of a pickup here, but I wonder how much of that is going to be in the double support avenue whenever the white main off the table, not committing to a support and only going to be a solo support here for Endemic. It's Blaze and Junkrat, and that is when Endemic looks best, I feel like, is whenever they have the opportunity to go with the Junkrat. Some off-lane wave clear there for Mikey Doll.
The Junkrat, I love on Infernal Shrine. So much control, so much into that wave clear. If they round out with an Alex Straza, they're very well built for that solo lane between the Blaze and the Junkrat. You can double dip on that.
Yeah.
It's something that, there was a game on Infernal where Dansky was on a Phoenix earlier this phase. They had some of the best in terms of defense. They're going to go more into that Tyrael for Simplicity. They're going to pair it with a Sonya, hero whose name we haven't called much as of late, but a hero on Infernal Shrines we know has had priority in the past.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of all-in kind of death ball approach still there from Simplicity, committing with the Tyrael, but having the Smite to enable the mobility of the Raynor and the Sonya is going to work out a lot better there. That was the first concern I had with the Maiev, expecting them to go with this all-in playstyle, is that the Deckard and Raynor wouldn't be able to keep up with the rest of that dive from the team here, but that Smite should be able to enable it a little bit easier for the squad. And we get our last pick into the Alex Straza. No surprise there. I feel like Endemic has a composition that overall, synergy-wise, works out really well. I would argue it's like maybe slightly dated, but I don't feel like they're pushed hard enough compositionally by Simplicity that I think it's going to be that big of a problem here.
I 100% agree with you. It seems you can take this, transplant it to week number 4 of phase 2 and say, oh, this is
the
dominant.
draft.
This is it.
Endemic's got it, boys. Like, this game's over. This is Infernal Shrines. They've got the control. They have the pressure. They've got the AoE synergy between Hanzo. They've got the Blaze, the Johanna. It's going to look good. But it is one of those, there's a reason that hasn't been at the forefront as much anymore. It's definitely not too shabby of a strategy. If anybody's got the dated strat, it's the Tyrael Sonya pairing.
Well, that's the point. I think you brought up an excellent point, because if this is a more recent meta draft, then all of a sudden the Endemic draft does look a little different. But for here, on the side of Simplicity, the common theme, I mentioned it when we started this draft, Maiev is great at initiating. The one thing that Tyrael lacks due to his lack of CC is the initiation. They seem to rally around that Maiev, pick up the Tyrael, and go in with that. This time we're going to see an iteration with Sonya on it. We've seen it on other Battlegrounds. We're going to see the version with Sonya. So they continue to evolve this very similar strategy for Endemic. When they played against Team Freedom Dreadnought, they were very calculated. It started on Infernal Shrines again in that Team Freedom series. They knew what to expect. They dealt with it. They studied. I think Endemic, if they've been watching in the recent past, their draft might be able to deal with just this style of composition as we get things underway. Endemic versus Simplicity.
Here in the blue, it is going to be Endemic, where we have Dansky is going to be on the Hanzo. Cure for the team, playing the Blaze in that off-lane. Big impact, playing support for Alex Straza. Mikey Doll here on Junkrat, and last is B-Kid on the Johanna.
For Simplicity, they'll be on the right side here in red. So it will be Hosty. He'll be on the Raynor. Having K1 Pro on that Maiev, the playmaker for this team in this composition. King Caffeine on the front line on Tyrael, Tiger JK on Deckard, leaving Zuna on Sonya.
One thing that I'm going to be keeping my eye on throughout the entirety of this game is going to be how often does Zuna find himself in positions to actually get the immediate follow-up and value out of K1 Pro when he comes in with that tether or Warden's Cage? Because if the damage is not there, following up fast enough, which I think because he has a gap closer through the spear, he's more reliable to have that single target first. I think that if it's not there fast enough, Endemic is going to see the bunker situation, throw the counter AoE crowd control in, and get a really powerful counter initiation. And I think Raynor matters in this, but Sonya's immediate burst with the Ancient Spear, that is the go-to lethal here for Simplicity.
I remember watching the Zuna teams last year, and there always seemed to be some miscommunication in a lot of ways. And there were plays where I would see Zuna, he would dive in and get a very good initiation start, but his team would be 2 to 3 steps behind. And I don't know whether that's communication, but it looked like the right call more often than not in those situations. And there was issues with the teams of last year. And I mean, there was one on Dragonshire on Thrall. I'm like, man, it's like if his team follows up this call, this works. I look at this draft and this roster of Simplicity, and this is a style that can work in a team that will not be 1 to 2 to 3 steps behind with this Tyrael, with this Maiev, and there's less burden on Sonya. But it still comes down to the meta and the play. He's so mechanically skilled and gifted, it's a matter of finding the right synergy within the draft that they like to play.
I think that's a good point you bring up here, and they're going to need synergy if they want to invade this camp down below. Maiev did make the transition down, but not going to be fast enough. Endemic picking up the Impalers, but not too much momentum onto their side throughout this game. And Jay-How, I always like talking about, you know, whenever I see maybe an opportunity to adjust within a game itself. This is not one where I expect, but there is a small possibility in using the original Eraser composition. Based on the fact that Alex...
Judgment lead?
Yeah, based on the fact that Alex Straza is pretty vulnerable to that kind of immediate burst. There's always the bunker where you go probably not, and even then, I don't know if that would be the go-to approach, but it's something we might want to consider here as the game moves on. If Simplicity thinks that maybe the all-in team fighting is not going to be enough there. It used to be a bit better than it is in the modern meta, as the damage output of both of those heroes was significantly higher than it is now.
It's always fun to see teams try something. What's old is new again. The Arthas lately. This is a map where Arthas wouldn't be too shabby if you wanted to go down that route, but Blaze does do a very good job of controlling the front line, getting the stuns out, and then, as you mentioned, providing that bunker. Still go in, get an early tether onto Cure. He'll walk forward, join in on the party.
Not too much fear there, though, on his body language whatsoever, as Mike Udall now looking to join in here. It's a full 5-on-5 for both the teams as we get our first shrine of the game started off. Tether going to land there from K1 Pro, and a Mike Udall falling extremely low. Big impact. Going to have to heal that one up. Both Abundance and his Q actually using that time frame, so no healing available for a while. No Dragon Queen out yet either of those. We got 13 Skeletal Defenders to the 5 of that of Simplicity.
Dansky will agility over the wall, but K1 Pro says, I know exactly where you're going. He'll come in, land the tether. That's going to be first blood there. Very well played by K1 Pro, who's trying to survive as he gets some assistance and shielding from K1 Pro, or King Caffeine.
Now returning back over to the shrine. Going to restore the balance here. Still another 5 seconds till Hanzo joins up onto the battlefield. Another 10 seconds to transition. Big impact comes in there with the Dragon Queen, but he falls pretty low. K1 Pro threatening him back there with that shadow for a moment there. Questioning if he wants to commit. Hanzo now on his way back here, tied at 25 Skeletal Defenders between these two teams. But it looks like that damage was enough to threaten back Endemic here. And Simplicity pick up the first punish here.
I've been so impressed these last few weeks with the Maiev play from K1 Pro. There's good and bad with a lot of compositions, but the one constant that we see in this composition outside of the Tyrael is the Maiev, but the consistent play to set so much up for his team, it's clearly there. And just continuing to evolve here. It is early. This will be baited over. Blaze and Sonya have made their way down to the lower lanes as this will be cleared up by Endemic.
But we do see Simplicity go for the sidewall focus. Question if they would be able to make something happen. It's not the most innovative or anything of the like, but I feel like that is something where Simplicity showed that they're trying to be more proactive than we've gotten from them in the past here. Diving in onto that, see if they can keep that up through the rest of this game. But I do agree with you when looking at K1 Pro onto the Maiev. It does feel like I think in general, Simplicity seems to stand out whenever he's on a hero that he can demand, kind of answers from Endemic and really force an initiation. But also, you know, the flashy plays of the Maiev really caters to his play style as well.
The calm early going, first shrine, not too many explosions, 1 kill equals a Punisher for Simplicity. Hard to really enact much action beyond that. Level 10 will be picked up likely by the time the next shrine comes up. That's when we can see that Death Ball composition based around this Tyrael. To get into that back line, Tiger JK though coming in with the flank, very nicely done as Kieran team trying to hold and survive this.
Big impact ends up going down there. Great job, as you said, the setup. Azuna now caught out with the concussion mine. Condemn coming through, damage there as the oil and flame thrown out by Cure. 1 for 1 here between the two teams. A very good rotation there for Simplicity, other than the Mike Udall getting a great response, catching Zuna out, trying to get that melee damage out there. It was a huge play on that scroll ceiling.
This is just me fanboying, but it's not about a player. Every single ability and talent and everything that I get from Blaze, probably the best sound compilation in the game. I love watching Blaze games and hearing those subtle Blaze abilities. Thank you, as we get to see some more. Every single thing. Whoever worked on this hero did a magnificent job. That's just me fanboying. Thank you so much for bringing that hero here as we get back to the game. It's just my absolute favorite.
I never knew you felt that passionate about Blaze.
Every single, from the tin can to bounce, to the oil, to the jets, to the auto attack, it's glorious. Glorious.
I agree. His voice actually is one of my favorite within the entire game. Him and Malthael, something about him here. But the calm's still here until that next shrine phase is going to spawn J-Hal. But both teams putting some consideration, knowing that it's going to be spawning on the bottom half of the battleground, wanting to put focus onto their shaman. Wonder if Zuna is going to stick with this offlane a little bit longer than maybe the Blaze. Blaze does have a little bit better clear, but when you get the raw siege capabilities, right? Let's say both the offlaners kind of are left alone. Zuna does way more damage when it comes to the overall siege capabilities if he wants to commit there, especially if you pop Wrath, short enough cooldown to be able to make plays like that. So we'll see what he ends up doing.
Camp picked up by Endemic to start. The one thing to note about Alexstrasza compositions, and we saw them falter after that kill, but you get behind on a shrine against an Alexstrasza, it's hard to come back because Alexstrasza will sit on that dragon till around that 20 mark, that magical 20 mark, and then we'll try and make that push towards the 40. And so you cannot afford to wait too long as we see the early initiation. Healing reduction comes in as well as the root, so a couple of tools used by Tiger.
And Devin needs to be very careful of that choke. That's the second time they body clumped around that. If that happens again, K1 Pro is going to execute and look for a major setup on those kills. 3-man split there towards bottom. Endemic now adjusting the angle at which they're approaching the shrine. Very tied up, 15 to 15. Scroll ceiling does come through as the Dragon Queen now popped by Big Impact here. Looking to turn the tide. Jet propulsion comes out, lands onto 2.
Still close, there it is. Biggie's gonna go into that cleansing flame, will allow him to jump right out of that ring. The lead starting to climb. Riptire will help confirm the last few. Very well played there, getting into that cleansing flame. When you're in the dragon, it's a heck of a lot easier to get out of those situations.
Yeah, nice job there by Big Impact to survive. Now let's see what Endemic can make happen with the Punisher. Leap 1 coming out on the King Caffeine. Probably going to be dealt with relatively quick enough to not be too concerned with the second leap. Another 10 seconds there. This fort will end up falling victim here to Endemic. Now we're tied up, 12 to 12 here. Slow starting here for the beginning half of the game. Just, you know, a couple of fights over the shrine itself, but Endemic is pulling ahead when looking at the structural advantage. And that is a bit more concerning just looking at the overall wave clear between the two. The Blaze, Junkrat, and the offlane Soak, if they get a structural advantage, it's far easier to maintain that lead for Endemic than it is for Simplicity. So something may have to be done about that here as the game moves on. But Cure has to use the bunker.
60-second cooldown, somewhat forgiving, but very well played there by Zuna. This Cure will survive. I expected this game, you know, be more chaotic, more fast-paced with the composition of Simplicity. But then I think, okay, well, that last fight, they tried. I mean, they ripped a few heroics trying to get it out, but it was just very well played by Endemic. And Endemic is more around shrine control. They're not looking to necessarily rip these big team fights. You know, you can engage, but between the concussion mines, the Johanna to walk away, the Riptire, it's more about zoning control and winning these shrines. And you know, they lost out on the first one, but the more impactful ones as we come on, it's a battle of wills with these style of plays.
Yeah, normally that wouldn't be that big of a problem, but Simplicity, they have two options in those type of circumstances when the shrines spawn. Now the game is late enough that I'm not sure they had the opportunity to, you know, alter towards it. But normally what you would do is you either go, we're going to give up the shrine completely, because you can basically look at Alex Straza Dragon Queen and say that's a minimum 15 to 20 of the Skeletal Defender. So if I'm not fighting at the 20 mark, then I'm really putting myself in a position to just not be successful over it. So Simplicity has the all-in capabilities for that 20 threshold, and they all have to rotate all in, which is where they've been going, but they've been waiting out, you know, a couple rotations of spells, and that's too little too late with the Alex Straza on the other side. The only other option would be to look for maybe a split push elsewhere, but even then, we never see that. All of Simplicity is rotating because they think we have this death ball composition, we have to compete.
Top lane, the focus for Endemic. They've stretched their lead to about a half lead. You can see the ping on the well. Because the next shrine is top, they would love to get that well, but a response here by Simplicity will push them back for now. The root just going to miss. Is Endemic able to walk away? Simplicity will look to soak up the other lanes. In the meantime, try and not get too far behind in the experience department.
Shaman Gam started by Endemic. See if Simplicity can maybe sniff this out at all. Holy Ground would be an easy steal over the wall, but it looks like more emphasis towards that top well and fort. Well's going to be picked up. Kira lands a two-man jet propulsion. Scroll of Ceiling, though, is going to lock down 3. Blessed Shield thrown out. Dragon's Arrow as well thrown out. Is the bunker there? Zuna gets the retreat. A lot of heroics kind of thrown out there over what seems like a pretty minor quarrel.
Yeah, that now, when we look at this shrine, this is the scariest shrine to fight on because of the lack of exit points. The fight generally consists in the lower half of the shrine and spills out into the lane. So having lane control generally comes with these camps and controlling that mid line. But 16 is very close for Endemic. They have short cooldown heroics, but you can see they're still 20+ seconds away for those 3.
Here we see the 5-man commitment, the start over that Skeletal Defenders for Simplicity. We'll see if they get a big enough advantage this time before the initiation. And that Alex Straza Dragon Queen, as Big Impact moves up with the rest of Endemic now. Riptire going to be thrown down by Mike Udall. But it's just merely a zoning tactic. But it gives enough window here, J-How, for that time frame, that window we were talking about. Now the 20 threshold's here. Big Impact's going to move away, look for a Dragon Queen, and that is their Punisher up. So much so, Simplicity not willing to commit there, especially considering the 16 talents here lingering above.
Yeah. The biggest part about 16, when you mention the Dragon Queen, is the extra duration on it with that 16 talent tier. It's like fighting into a Dragon Queen is hard enough. Fighting into an extra 7 seconds on the Dragon Queen is even more difficult. Endemic, they'll move forward, no wall in the way, so no defense for Simplicity in this top fort. They do need to get back towards that keep wall. They have the material to bait that over, but early advantages here to start this by Endemic, and they've committed all 5 members now, Dread, for this push.
Keep wall, side wall is very important there as it goes down. Leap number 1, baited over the wall. Who's going to get the... Looks like Calf tried to for a second there. No opportunity to escape now as the leap does end up coming through. Good damage there after the Scroll of Ceiling. K1 Pro questioning if he wants to be able to get a flank. Another 5 seconds till that next leap. Let's see if Endemic capitalize. Dragon Queen's out.
They're looking to make the push for not just some damage, but all the damage. They want this keep. There goes K1 Pro with the first feign. It comes out. Looks like they're going to accomplish just this as the Riptire was used. The Dragon Queen's still out. See if Simplicity can try and turn this, but here comes the Cleansing Flame.
K1 getting knocked back by the concussion mine, set them back a lot, trying to start and force that initiation, and now actually Hosey getting caught out there, taking the damage, and now down a member. Simplicity might not be able to take this initiation. The Dragon's Arrow locks down 2, the follow-up with Cure landing the jet propulsion. 2 members of Simplicity are done, and now Zuna trying to spin to win to kite out. The oil is there, the jet propulsion follow-up. 2-man condemn, bringing it back. The bunker body block. Zuna goes down with that flamethrower. 3 kills picked up by Endemic. And what are they going to do with it here? An opportunity to maybe get some damage onto the core, not wanting to risk it. Play it a little safer here and wait for that 20 spike.
Dread, I really like this rotation mid. The next shrine will be mid. They'll also have that 20 tier advantage. Will Endemic. Before then, they have to make sure and survive for now as Cure doing his best to eat all of the shots. They will get this down. That will increase the race towards 20, but set up a potential win condition a little easier. If they get 20, Simplicity, highly unlikely that they get 20. So for Simplicity, Dread, they've got some work to do between or before that next shrine spawns.
It's a tough position here for Simplicity, and I feel like at this point it's in their best interest to find ways to get that desperation kill in some way, shape, or form around the battleground. The best way to do that is going to be predicting the next camps coming up. Since every camp is pretty much down at this point in time, J-Hop, the only area I feel like that is going to be a realistic option is 37 seconds for the top left Endemic Shaman camp. That means you already need to be working on mid lane if that is going to be the decision. And the fact that nobody's gotten that clear yet, Zuna now just going to it. But even then, it doesn't necessarily indicate that is the thought process from Simplicity. We'll see if they end up finding a way to make that happen. Otherwise, 20 spike and likely another Punisher for Endemic.
Endemic will try and close out game number 1. Every map matters for Simplicity. LFM is very much aware of that. Here goes Simplicity. Yes, Dreadnought.
There's a very important thing to highlight here. They're doing exactly what I was highlighting and talking about, but there was a big difference. The reason that mid-clear mattered is because they could clear the bottom lane after. Now they are showing that this is the only place on the battleground they can be because they did not clear bottom. And that is because they did not clear midway fast enough. So Endemic just goes, wait a minute. We get free push on bottom. You see Michael Dahl throwing out the nades, just going, they have to be over on this side of the battleground. And that is why those rotations and the time sensitivity is very, very important over this late game decision making.
Yeah, you pointed it out right before then that mid lane and that bot lane were priority, not making sure they clear that before that rotation. They now have conceded 20. They have to deal with this top lane. The Shrine now spawning. There's no way for Simplicity to, 1, get a pick, 2, keep Endemic out of that bottom lane. And sometimes we would see teams like Simplicity. They're like, all right, they don't have 20 yet. We'll force the action, see if Endemic will bite. Maybe get that top fort down, some keep wall down to get your race towards 20. Now, that's basically impossible for Simplicity to do. So they have a tough decision here. Do we fight or do we hope that we only lose 1 keep and Endemic doesn't just run all over us? Because just like that last push, when the Dragon Queen is not used on the Shrine, it will be used for the push on the core.
Simplicity forfeiting the rest of the Shrine. And you posed it best. Did we just lose ourselves 1 keep? Last Punisher, the bait on the first leap was not as successful as Simplicity maybe would have liked. Cap is going to sniff out this camp. I don't think he's going to go for the Holy Ground 1 versus 4. Playing it a bit safer, and we'll end up backing out here. Here is Endemic with the Punisher leap, but I was saying last time they didn't follow up on the second leap. I feel like that's not going to be the case this time. Endemic, they know that this is a potential lethal in this game.
Well, the fact that now Endemic will have a 2-pronged approach with that camp on the top lane, baited over, but K1 Pro will be part of that stun. Punisher, 80% and falling. Zuna and team go forward. This is an arcane Punisher as well, which is the more intimidating one, the more damaging one. As right now, Endemic will work their way through this core, or through the keep, and the minute that comes out, here comes the Dragon Queen, Dread.
Yeah, Dragon Queen with the Dragon's Arrow, Blessed Shield, Lornado, and Riptire. Good night. King Caffeine is out of here, but the Tyrael passive coming through. Zuna on the back end trying to get the damage, but the Cleansing Flame is going to clean that one up. The double picked up here by Endemic. K1 Pro kiting himself out of the battle, but now Endemic wastes no time. Focus on to the core. And though it was not the most fireworked action game, Endemic in full control of this skirmish of Infernal Shrines since near minute 1.
Well, Dreadnought, you made a very good point on the draft, and that this draft might be a little dated for Endemic, but it wasn't pushed. It was not maybe countered as hard in the way that this map plays out and the way that that draft plays out, and Endemic was able to execute. You can ignore that first Punisher, that 1 kill, you don't give up much, and it didn't really seem like there was any control at all established by Simplicity. Sometimes in the early going, you'll see teams maybe play around hitting that double soak, getting a small lead there, and then finding their advantages elsewhere. Simplicity got a kill, but it didn't net a whole lot. They got the entire fort wall, and we know that experience isn't much anymore. So for Endemic, they played a patient approach. They played a very controlled approach, and every time that they got the Punisher from then on out, it was just smooth sailing.
And that's what I think we can probably expect for the rest of the series is Endemic is going to play those tried and true compositions that we know, they have pretty good synergy across the board. Again, maybe not pushing the envelope as the current meta as it stands, but we know that it's going to function pretty well as a comp. And then can Simplicity punish that or push the envelope in some way. And I'm going to say it's going to be through macro game is going to be the first place they have to find ways to clean that up. And that's part of the reason I think that one rotation to that camp shows you enough of why I would never ban Tomb against Simplicity. I think that the wave clear alone matters so much that I think that you can find ways to get that upper hand. And I thought that would be a setback for Endemic, but still showing that they very much came in with a game plan and they're executing. So.
Well, let's talk about some of the drafts for Endemic, because we saw the drafts on Friday. We brought this up already, but I want to elaborate a little further because we saw Arthas against Maiev. We've seen that come out as the counter. We saw Arthas in game number 2, the solo tank Zul. For a team that is transitioning through some of these role changes and had the 2 members that were out during last week, to me it seems like for a team like this, maybe play stuff that is more tried and true, more meta, so that you can get your feet wet, get Biggie comfortable in support role, a role that he hasn't really played in competitive. Get Michael Udall comfortable back on that shot calling. When you start to add more variables into that equation, like those drafts, I mean, is there some context for saying maybe we do need to narrow our focus and play a little simpler?
Oh, I'm very much in line with your train of thought there. That should be the approach. Get as many constants as you can so that the few variables that you need to learn, like how big of an impact is it, how good are we at improving those specific elements, gets a lot more clear on what the highs and lows are. But I can't help but feel like not only because of the diversity and success of teams like Octalysis, but also one of the biggest things that when looking at Octalysis, I always talk about is that standard gap is missing for them based on the practices we see from every other team. So I'm almost wondering, is there a level of inspiration that some teams are getting from Octalysis with this huge leap of step number 1? It seems like most teams have to take, and they go, we can do that too. And I don't know if Endemic is that bold yet, but that is something that I'm wondering, is there a certain element of inspiration, if you will, being taken from Octalysis there?
He uses, that's a definite yes. Let's find out where